Hello, Alison. How are you?
I am great. Thanks, Graeme. The sun is actually shining in Edinburgh, so all is right in the world.
Miracles do happen. It was a little bit on
Miracle.
the foggy side today, wasn't it? But it seems to have
Yeah,
brightened
absolutely.
up. Brightened up. Well, hello and welcome to everybody for another great webinar on how to be, talking of being great, of how to be great at video job interviews. Just to let everybody know, we are streaming out across multiple platforms today, including LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube as well. And on that note, if you do find what we're talking about of use to you all today, there is plenty of other content available as well on our main careers website. If you just type in enterprise rent-a-car jobs, it will come up with some really useful content, anything from how to be more resilient, how to make a great impression at work, and of course, other things such as how to be great at video interviews, which is what we're talking about today. So, Alison, video job interviews, is this something that you have some experience in?
Yes, I guess in the dim and distant past, I did do your job, Graeme. So I've worked in graduate recruitment and development for lots of different companies. So I have had experience of video interviewing as a recruiter. And in the last number of years, I've worked at the University of Edinburgh in the career service. And as part of my job, I'm about connecting employers to our students and vice versa. And as part of that, I get to pick up all the great tips from employers like yourself around what they would advise students and graduates do to shine at video interviews.
Absolutely, and that's exactly what we're looking for today. So it's going to be a nice, short and snappy webinar with aim really to give you, some really useful top tips that you can take away, because whether we like it or not, we've all got video job interviews coming up, whether they're going to be in the next few months or the next couple of years, because it really feels now that these are here to stay. Okay, well, without further ado, let's get into it. So, little introduction. Alison, would you like to kind of formally introduce, and then I'll do a very quick intro on myself and we'll get cracking?
Yeah, sure. As I said, I work in the career service in our employer team. So as I said, that means I'm connecting our employers to our students and vice versa. So my aim is to make sure that we get a large number and a diversity and range of opportunities for our students, and also to help ensure that our employers meet the recruitment targets. So that's what I do on a day-to-day basis. Most of my time is spent speaking to employers like yourself.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, you do have to deal with me on a regular basis, Alison, but you can't have it. You can't have it easy all the time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Well, thank you ever so much, Alison, for joining us. We really appreciate that. And as per the slide, I am Graeme. I work as part of the talent acquisition team at Enterprise, covering a variety of different roles, including our award-winning graduate management trainee program, where you can go from being a brand new graduate to a store or branch manager in as little as 2 years. And you'll have to have some interviews along the way. So this will really come into help. We really hope so anyway. So without further ado, let's get into it, Alison. The first thing I really wanted to kind of touch on is, to many of us, when we just see video interview, it may feel like there's only one type of a video interview out there, or job interview in a virtual setting, but actually there's many more, isn't there? And some people have definitely got caught out, I think, in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, again, it's just part of your homework, isn't it? Understanding what sort of interview is it going to be. It could be as simple as this. So using some sort of video conferencing platform, whether it's Zoom or Teams or Google Hangouts, so it doesn't really matter the platform, but it's a one-to-one conversation with a recruiter like this on screen. It's live. That's the most useful one, the most popular one, I would say, in terms of most employers use it.
And I think this is really, in the last couple of years, especially with everything that's happened, this is something that has definitely become more kind of common practice. So, but on that note, just because you maybe done a Zoom or a Microsoft Teams interview previously, that doesn't actually mean that that is the only type of video or virtual interview you may have to go through, because there is a lot of graduate employers do use what's called a pre-recorded video interview. Are you able to share kind of any insight, Alison, on how a pre-recorded video interview is a bit different to kind of the live one? What sort of things could students look out for?
I think the key thing is it's a one-way interview. So you are talking to a screen. So you'll be sent an email, a login, check your junk in advance. You'll be sent that login to that site. You will log in and you'll be met with a talking head, generally, with some questions on the screen. As opposed to a live person. So your responses are being recorded is the key thing. and the recruiter, they will be assessed by the recruiters afterwards, after the session. So you've probably been given a time to do it within. So it's a time at your own choice, but within a time frame. And I guess the other key difference is that as you're being recorded, the question will flash up and you're probably given maybe 30 seconds typically to prepare your response and then 2 or 3 minutes to answer it. So that's the key difference. There won't be follow-up questions. There won't be any kind of reaction from the screen.
It's a bit strange. If you haven't done one before, I really, really encourage, and there's lots of platforms online which will let you do tests. And actually with a lot of the graduate companies and a lot of employers in general who use video interview platforms, there'll often be a test question. So you can have a go, because as Alison quite rightly mentioned, often once you're in the kind of sequence, you've pressed play, it will play the question, it'll ask you, you'll have to record it, and then it'll go on to the next one. So you don't have a lot of time in between. Often you have to record them all in one go. And again, as Alison mentioned, that there is a timing element, and I've seen it in the past where a student will keep talking and then they'll just get cut off halfway through a question because there will be a set timing on that, and then they'll get in a bit of a flap and it will go on to the next question. And it can really kind of go on that way. So the practice piece is absolutely critical for that, because there is that. And I guess kind of moving on from that, if we are talking live video interviews, again, don't just assume it is going to be a one-on-one interview, because people have been quite out in the past. You're expecting a one-on-one interview and you log onto the platform and there's a room of 2 or 3 or 4 people interviewing you in a panel setting, which again can be a little bit unnerving. Do you have any advice, Alison, for people who are, if they are a little bit nervous about that video interview, because it can be a little bit surreal, especially the first one that you do, I guess?
Again, just general advice, as you said, is practice is the key thing. University career services as well as that particular platform having a chance to practice at the beginning. University career services will have an opportunity to either have a mock interview online practice with a careers consultant. You can arrange and book that, certainly at Edinburgh. And as well as that, they will have some software that will replicate those pre-recorded platforms that recruiters are using. So again, you can practice that as well. See yourself, get some feedback from others. There's nothing like that. But I think the bit about you don't have to be perfect, you just have to be good enough. So not getting into a flap when, oh my goodness, do I have to fill those 3 minutes? No, you don't. Yes, the time will give an indication of the level of detail the recruiter's looking for, but just good enough, not perfect.
Is there such a thing as a perfect interview? I'm not entirely sure. And I guess that kind of links into our next point. And again, if you're ever unsure when you're going into an interview, what the format is, what the tech needs to be, etc., please reach out to the recruiters, as we'd much rather know in advance as your recruiter versus you calling us 5 minutes before. And we'll talk a little bit more about tech before we get to the end of this webinar as well. But if unsure, just ask. There is no such thing as a stupid question, and we'd really prefer you do that. One of the things we talk about, and Alison's already mentioned, is that preparation piece. And I would say this is for video interviews, but alongside that, it's great best practice for when you are going for in-person interviews as well. The model that I really recommend using, and anytime someone's used this with me when they're talking about enterprise who I work for, it really does show them in a really positive light. And it ultimately goes from very large to very particular and specific research. So my point would be, when it comes to how you've prepared for an interview, make sure you have understanding of the industry that you're looking to go into, whatever industry it may be, whether it's automotive, whether it's retail, whether it's pharmaceutical, whatever it may be. What do you know about the industry? Have you read any news articles recently? Can you talk about the trends in the industry? Is a great starting point. And then go a bit more granular. What do you know about the company and the background and history? Because these are often the first questions which are asked in an interview. And there's so many times that we'll ask just a very open question, what research have you done on enterprise? And there always tends to be a big level of difference on research. Looking at the careers website is one thing, but there's so many other avenues you can look at. And then moving on from that, what do you know about the department you might be based in, the role itself? How much research have you done about the role? I would never recommend going into an interview and asking, "Oh, can you actually tell me what the role is? Because I'm not really sure." That just makes you look unprepared. Have some, it's much better to say, I've researched on the role, and from my understanding, it's quite a broad role. Can you tell me more about this aspect of the role? That's a much better question than, I don't have any idea what I've applied for, because then again, it doesn't make you look prepared. And I guess the other step forward from that is, if someone is interviewing you and they've got that, and it will say your interviews with Alison Parkinson from University of Edinburgh. Have you connected with them on LinkedIn? Have you looked? Is there anything you can discuss there? Because if all else fails and you get to the end of the interview, whether it's virtual or in person, you can ask them about themselves. "Oh, I see, Alison, you studied or you work at University of Edinburgh, etc., etc." So for me, the preparation piece is always critical. Is there anything you would add on that note, Alison, from your kind of takeaway on the prep side?
That bit about preparing your own questions, I think, is useful as well. That piece you said at the end about thinking about just having 3 or 4 about where's the company headed in the next few years. Tell me a bit about your competitors. What do you love about your job? That having those questions at the end, I think, also demonstrates your level of interest and engagement and enthusiasm for the organisation. And that bit about your research, I think my top tip for students and graduates as well would be to use LinkedIn's alumni tool if you haven't come across that. So just look into your own particular university, University of Edinburgh. There's a tab that says alumni, click on that, and that allows you to search for people who studied at your university and the types of roles in companies and organisations they're working for. And for that particular organisation, you can then see who at Edinburgh is now working for that organisation. And it just gives you a sense of the sorts of degree discipline they did, the sorts of subjects they did. It gives you kind of, again, it might prompt more questions for you. And kind of it helps kind of the richness of that discussion you're going to have with the recruiter, that you've got a much
100%.
better understanding of the role.
It makes a huge difference. And again, I would always say, if you're ever unsure, for example, if you're looking at applying for a role with Enterprise as a graduate management trainee, you can just Google the job title and it'll come up with everyone in the business who has that specific position. And then what you can do is connect with them directly and always ask them a few questions about the role, the position, and then most people are brand advocates, so they'll be more than happy to kind of help you on that one. This is just something that I have a bit of a pet peeve about. And I was just going to ask you this, Alison, as someone who's in this discipline as well. And the reason I put the tennis player is I use this analogy, and I'll just share a very quick anecdote. So my dad used to be a tennis coach, so he's obviously at quite a good standard of tennis. And I, as a kid, used to play quite a lot of tennis. Every year I go home for Christmas and we have our annual father-son tennis match, and he absolutely wipes the floor with me. But by the end of it, I've definitely got better because I've had a chance to practice and improve, etc., etc. And my dad just always turns to me and says, "Well, Graeme, what do you expect? You play tennis once a year. You can't expect to pick up a tennis racket having not done so for a year and be at the same standard." And I like this analogy because for me, whether it's sport, hobbies, etc., same with interviews. If you don't interview regularly, people get out of practice. And it's just something that kind of dawned on me. Why don't people practice video interviews or job interviews in general, Alison, in your opinion?
Maybe you don't have anyone to practice with. You've got the analogy of your dad playing tennis. If you just don't have somebody, or you assume you don't have somebody to practice with, you can practice with yourself, recording yourself on your phone. I have done that a number of times to pick out, just in terms of, we can talk later about tone and pace and body language and those sorts of things, but just recording yourself is a great thing. Getting your friends to record you, giving some feedback. Again, careers consultants will be delighted to give you some feedback. I think why you don't is you assume that people don't really want to hear you. They don't have the time or the energy to listen to you practice, but your friends and family definitely do. I would encourage you to ask them, and you can repay the compliment at some point in the future. So I think one reason why you don't is you assume you don't have anybody to do it. You assume you know it. You assume you don't need to. Yes. That's the other key thing is, I've done loads of video chat before. I use video all the time, chatting to my friends. Why do I need to do this? Well, I think it's that in the moment where the stakes are maybe a little higher and your nerves kick in, this is a very different sort of feeling. But having that practice and that sense of, I can do this, it builds your confidence. And and therefore you will perform much better. You will feel much better, and as a consequence, perform better.
It sounds like a really obvious thing, doesn't it? But what do you think, Alison, from the tech side of things? What would be your best practices, I guess, for that?
My top tip, I was reflecting on this morning when you asked me about this session, is I heard somebody say once, control the controllable. My top tip is check your tech, then check it again. Even 2 years on, check it again. And what can you control? You download the software in advance. Is it Zoom? Have I used it before? Am I familiar with it? It's a bit like the equivalent of getting a map and a route to the venue if you're going for an interview in an office. What's the route into this interview? Make sure I've tested that and I'm not making assumptions. Testing your Wi-Fi, is it stable? Again, what can I control? If I'm in a shared house and there's lots of people maybe using the Wi-Fi at the same time, can I ask them, please don't stream videos for the next half hour? I've just done that with my kids. It's just that kind of basic thing. That bit around testing your webcam and your mic and the volume setting. Things I have done that I'm ashamed to say is not plugging in my device and halfway through it's called the laptop's battery's dead. So basic things like that. The other thing I did this morning, which I haven't done for a while, but again, I thought, the stakes are quite high, is I noted down Graeme's mobile number. So I thought, okay, if this all goes pear-shaped and I disappear, I can call Graeme and tell him, or if I can't get on, or I've also know the login for the mobile. I can switch to mobile data. If the connectivity goes down, I can switch to mobile. So those are the kind of things. Graeme, you did earlier when your connectivity wasn't that great. I heard you saying, I'm going to close down some browsers and tabs because that's slowing down the application. Those kinds of things are the things you can control. So control the controllable. Don't worry about the uncontrollable stuff. That's great
advice. That is great advice, because you almost have to, when you're doing a video interview, it has to be military precision, doesn't it? I think you have to have everything. And great example, again, I probably use Zoom 3 or 4 times a week, but this session started at 12 and I logged in at 11:30 and Zoom had decided to tell me it was doing an update. And of course, it's always the way. It's always the way. Yeah. The apps will update themselves whether you like it or not, and you just want to be on top of that. The other thing that I've always been told, which I'm really, really bad for, and this is one of those things where I really don't practice what I preach, is when you are on a video interview, I'm not saying we're all vain, I'm not at all, but you have to look into the camera on your laptop, not the little picture of yourself. Because if I'm looking into the picture of myself, I'm here, and you have to look in the camera. But there's just something about human, how we are as humans. We always want to look at ourselves, but try wherever possible to do that. Or maybe put a nice picture above your webcam so you can focus a little bit more up, because it is really tricky to do that. And, again, Alison mentioned have some great questions. A typical interview in person normally starts with a handshake. You can't do a handshake virtually, but try to think of something else to talk about apart from the weather, which is ironic because we started off by talking about the weather. But, is there something of interest to talk about? So it's not just I've run out of things to say before I get started. Or maybe there's an article you read, or there's something interesting you've watched on TV, or maybe you have an interesting fact. Anything, I'd say, to start the interview off in a positive tone. Is what you want to do. And it is tricky, but if you can, a lot of people have this habit of when they interview virtually to have their hands, kind of under their legs or something like that. But you have to try still to articulate and use your body language accordingly, which brings us on to this very nice slide here indeed. So Alison, tone, pace and body language. Let's tackle these one by one. What do we mean by tone when we're talking about a virtual video interview?
Tone for me is about what communicates your energy and your enthusiasm, and the obvious being, if your tone is monotone and you're talking like that, it's an exaggeration, obviously, it becomes very hard to listen to and the recruiter will switch off. So tone's about variety. It's about creating interest, and Anna said demonstrating. It's very impactful to demonstrate your energy, enthusiasm, and I think your confidence. So it builds rapport in the same way that eye contact does. Tone helps.
I think it's important, and also a lot of the feedback and studies have done this, showing that people come across almost as a little bit less engaging on virtual. So you have to kind of try to ramp up a little bit and really kind of, I don't know if usually is the right word, but you have to kind of big yourself up a little bit, I think, because people do come across as a little bit less engaging. And the positivity on the tone. And then when we talk about pace, honestly, this is something that I personally, as someone who has to present a lot, have struggled with for years, because I think because I have quite a creative brain, everything wants to come out at once. And I just have a habit of talking at 100 miles an hour because there's just ideas, ideas, ideas. And I really have to try to make a conscious effort to slow down.
That's my problem as well, is going too quickly. I have a card right now that has been in the last 2 years beside my screen that says slow, smile, pause. Slow, smile, pause. Because for me, the thing about stillness calms me down. The thing about speed, what you want the recruiter is, yes, to get your kind of enthusiasm and excitement about the job, but not to kind of feel like they're trying to keep up, that they're on some sort of runaway train. It's just exhausting. I know I can be exhausting. I've had that feedback, so I share your pain, Graeme. But it's about, okay, can I just slow this down in a way that is more engaging, and using space and pauses, as I'm trying to do now self-consciously, for emphasis can be really powerful, and it gives me time to think. One of the best tips I got, that bit about pace and energy and tone, was think about it on a scale of 1 to 5. Think about your energy online, Graeme. I agree that it's harder to project it, and sometimes they're a bit low. 5 is children's TV presenter. I am on, I am up, I am high. And you're going to use that really sparingly. But you are going to use, if you're going to use it, it's at the beginning, at the end. Great first impression, great lasting impression. So higher energy. 0, slumped in a chair unconscious. You're never going to use that during an interview. You immediately, you're diminished, you're less impactful. Nobody's got any sense that you're interested in them or the job. But that bit about, maybe you're around a 3 or 4. You're a 3 or 4 during the whole conversation. And that is what you're aiming for. And I try and keep that in my head when I'm talking online.
No problem at all. Let's see if any questions have come through. Question about, is the session recorded? Yes, all the sessions are being recorded. So you can actually completely revisit those online on the YouTube channel as well. But we'll just see if there's any questions that have come through. Okay, so Alison, what is your top tip? If you were to give people just one golden nugget, we often do this when it comes to video interviews.
That bit about good enough, and that bit about what I've seen done badly, is somebody's perhaps over-prepared in terms of its rehearsed robotic answers. So, and that gets in the way of how engaging they are. So they've got it down to a script. So my top tips, bullet points, some examples of things you've done well in the past, that bit about that we've talked about preparation. So thought about how you match the job, and what you've got that you can bring to the job in terms of your skills, your experiences, your traits. Have some examples, but don't have them like a script, like you're starting on stage. It's just have a few bullet points so you can talk freely.
And here's a question for you, Alison. The last question that's come through. What do recruiters prefer? Face-to-face, in person, or the video?
Oh, I think it depends. It's an annoying answer, but I think it depends. I think there's definitely, during the pandemic, necessity, bred invention. So we had to all move online, and therefore that's what we had to do. So we got good at it, and we're retaining some of that. The graduate recruiters are retaining that because it makes sense. It's got that flexibility. It's got that accessibility to reach a diverse or wider range of candidates, widen your pool. Easier to organise. Lots and lots of reasons why online video interviews work, and therefore I think they're here to stay. And recruiters are generally looking for an opportunity, because candidates, of course, want it, is to meet face-to-face at some stage in the recruitment process before that decision's made. Now the Scopus restrictions allow us to do that. We are going to take advantage of that opportunity, but it might be that it's later on in the process, I think, typically. Agreed.
And a lot of companies have kind of gone to a blended approach. Maybe the initial interview might be virtual or phone, and then the final round might be face-to-face. And that's actually what we've gone for at Enterprise as well. It does help with speed. Often we do find that virtual interviews tend to be a bit shorter, a bit quicker, but you don't have those traveling elements as well. But if you have the choice, I would say always try to go in person, because you never know who else you might meet when you're there. And you'll often, should have maybe a slightly better opportunity to make a long-lasting impression, just for some of the reasons that we've mentioned today. And I just want to say a huge thank you for giving up your time. Had we planned this better, we probably could have been in the same room or office together. We could have sat side by side.
Graeme. Next time, definitely. I look forward to it.
And of course, if you need any other future advice, both Alison and myself are easily contactable and findable on LinkedIn and social media as well. More than happy to connect and stay in contact with you as well. So I'd just like to say huge thank you to Alison. Thank you ever so much for your time.
Problem.
Hope everyone has a great rest of the week, and we'll be back very soon with more great content. Thanks ever so much.
Enjoy your
All
week.
right.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a
Bye-bye.
lot. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.